get a countdown. Oh, goody.
Oh,
Sit up.
that's my. All right.
Hi, everyone. It's Dom from the MS Guide. And this is all about sex. Sex, sex, sex. If I've got your attention now, that's excellent. And I was having a conversation with Marika, but first let's just go around, which I was having a conversation with Marika, which led me to think this might be a good thing to do. But let's just go around and introduce ourselves. First, we've got somebody new. Wendy, how long you had MS? Just tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm Wendy. I'm from Worcester in England, and I've had MS 2 years. So I've had it longer than that. I've had it about 10 years actually, but I've been diagnosed for 2.
Okay. Marika?
Yes, I'm Marika Oosterman. I'm from the Netherlands, and I've been diagnosed for 5 years now with relapsing-remitting MS.
Excellent. And last but not least, the birthday girl, Rebecca.
Hi all. I am from America. I've had MS for 20 years, and but don't tell my mom. But I've had sex a lot more than 20 years. So
excellent.
I feel like I'm well prepared for this conversation.
Well, I mean, frankly, you and I have done a whole video about sex before, so this is why you're one of my go-tos. And
I call it our sex tape, Dom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, President Trump would be jealous, but hey, everyone. So, sex is an ongoing, never-ending thing. I think it just changes in how you think about it, how much you want it or don't want it, or why not. And to a certain extent, I think it kind of exists alongside MS, but it's also affected by the MS that we've all got. And that puts additional wrinkles into the whole thing. But the reason we're here is I was chatting to Marika about some work that she was doing. Do you want to tell us about it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm a volunteer for the Dutch MS Society, and I write articles for them. And we're doing a series on sex and MS. And in this series, I'm interviewing people with MS who experience sexual dysfunction in any kind. And we put out a message asking people to get in touch and to volunteer for an interview with me. And so far, we've only got 2 people responding, and they were both men. And I had lovely interviews with them, and they were very open about their problems, which were both of them mostly erectile dysfunction. And they both told me how they deal with it, and one of them took Viagra, and the other one chose not to. But the bottom line in both cases was that they were very happy about their sex life, and that was basically because they did a lot of communication with their partners, and they talked with them about their problems and how they were going to solve it. So they took matters in their own hand.
Excuse me a second. Us men, yeah, us men aren't famed for our communication skills, especially when it comes to sex. I mean, do you think they were different? Had they worked this out, that this was important, or were they just those sort of guys that could do it naturally, should we say? Oh God, this is terrible.
No, I think that the fact that they reached out and wanted to talk about it, I mean, that's saying something, right. So that was very, very brave of them. But it also got me thinking that medically, sexual dysfunction in MS is handled quite one-sidedly, in my view. It's much about the mechanics, the penetrative intercourse, and it's doctors think they can easily fix it with a pill or lubrication and you're off. While especially I think women experience a very complicated issues regarding this topic. And it's much more about how you feel, mental health, hormones, all these kinds of things. So I found it interesting. So that's what we were talking about, right, Dominic?
Absolutely, yeah. It's I'm also noticing that probably all of us are just the other side of 40, and maybe just crept past the line a bit. But I think age means that yeah, you did it yesterday, didn't you, Rebecca?
I did.
Again, and it's but I think the whole thing changes. When I was 17, I was essentially a walking hormone and just figured it was my mission in life. And I don't know, forget MS. You just don't think you're going to get old. You don't think you're going to be affected by things. And then all of a sudden, I think it must be worse if you're younger. And all of a sudden you've got this sort of virile, go ahead, sow your wild oats. And then all of a sudden MS comes in and just goes, yeah, that's not happening as easily. I mean,
right. Yes. And
it's
I
in your
think,
head, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Wendy, has anything, I'm going to be quite personal, has anything come up in this sense? You've newly diagnosed compared to us, but has anything sort of cropped up where you thought, excuse me, holy shit, what's going on?
Not in a physical sense. It's interesting actually what Mariette said, actually, because I think I absolutely agree that there's something about the mental toll that it takes, actually, and the impact it takes mentally. Because for me, I'm lucky that actually at this moment in time, and that could change, I don't have any issues in terms of the physical kind of presentation of anything to do with that at all. However, there is this kind of it's interesting how it affects you in terms of how you see yourself. So for me, I think there's a couple of things, actually. There's the first thing around that kind of still being desirable. It's kind of that, I've got MS, and am I still going to be desirable to the opposite sex? Even though physically on the outside, I don't look any different how I looked 2 years ago. I do 10 years ago. Sorry, I've aged a bit, but kind of 2 years ago, no. But for me personally, I do sometimes think that, oh God, I'm not attractive anymore. I don't feel attractive anymore. And, I don't really,
because of the MS.
Yeah, because I think to myself, oh gosh, is there that sort of stigma of feeling a bit tainted? Does that sound wrong saying that? But it's kind of that, and I know that's a crooked thought. I'm wise enough to know that's not real, but actually it does still get to me. I do think to myself, am I going to be attractive to the opposite sex? Am I still attracted to the opposite sex? I don't feel it. And I know that, there's probably some truth to it for some people, but there's also a massive psychological element around it about how I feel, and that constant need sometimes that I feel like I need to better myself all the time to kind of wipe away that feeling of not being attractive anymore. And I do think that has caused me some issues personally, to be honest.
Yes,
we're all in long-term relationships, all of us, which I think I see on the forums and stuff, people going, oh, will I ever get a date if I've got MS or this or that? And I just think, it's really hard to relate because it's just, I've had it so long. But, you've had it 2 years. I mean, Rebecca, what happened when you were diagnosed? Because it was 15 years ago?
It was 20 years ago.
Okay, I'm like,
in April.
again,
close to 20.
Did that, so when you were that young, did it suddenly change? Like Wendy says, did you suddenly think, oh my God, I've got MS, no one will find me attractive?
No, I had the hubris of a 27-year-old. So I was hot and I knew it, and nothing was going to change that. Ha ha ha. No, but that was true. That is the wonderful, terrible thing about being diagnosed when you're that young, is that I was like, okay, you say I should take drugs, great, take the drugs, yum, 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 drugs. But I didn't think about the mental toll MS would have on me in the long term. I really didn't think too hard about the physical toll, because when I did, I cried. So I just kind of, went along my way with my partner who I'd been with for a few years before I got diagnosed. until eventually my body said, "Oh, you want an orgasm? How charming!" And, wouldn't do it. And there's all the things that come or don't come along with that. And
God, this is all
then
double entendres. I'm trying not to laugh.
no, it does. It's okay. I mean, I underlined that one. But yeah, and something that Wendy brought up when we were typing about this beforehand was this experience now of being a middle-aged lady who, as a middle-aged lady, I can tell you every day is like, wait, is this menopause? Like, is what my body's doing now menopause, or do I just not exercise enough or eat well enough? Like, I'm talking about the shape of my body rather than the actual function of my body here. But there are so many things, as Marika said, that play into like whether we feel desirable, whether we can perform in the bedroom. I'm mostly thinking about orgasms and things like that, but there's also, as Dom and I have talked about before, like my legs don't always work. If you're dealing with fatigue, it's hella hard to like feel sexy or feel like you're being a good partner in any of the rooms of the house. So yeah, it's just a big old mess of stuff. And there's stuff we can do.
Your description of orgasms being fireworks and everything turning into just nice, dimly lit. Oh,
right. Yeah. Oh, I guess that was nice. Yeah.
Okay, here's a question that I'm going to ask you all to salve our poor male egos. If a guy is, let's say, in his 30s, fairly early diagnosed, and I mean, when I was that age, I just, you're not going to die, you're unbreakable, it's all that kind of stuff. And then something comes along and cramps your style like this. I think now looking back that I'd say to them, chill out. The thing you need to do is communicate, and you need to talk, because it's not impossible. Things have just changed, and you've got to learn how to, frankly, get your rocks off another way. Yeah, but what would you guys say? I mean, I'm a bit blunt with this, but what would you guys say to somebody?
I would tell them to maybe this is controversial, but I would tell them to visit a gay bar and start a conversation with a lesbian, and get some drinks in her and ask her how her, well, maybe not, sex life is.
I mean, get punched.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so maybe this is a bad advice, but the thing is, lots of people in heterosexual relationships have this idea that sex is, there's foreplay. This is necessary, so we do this foreplay, and then is when the sex happens, when the penis goes into the vagina, and then the man ejaculates, and then the sex is over. Now, lots of heterosexual couples think like that, but this doesn't have to be the case. Foreplay doesn't have to be foreplay. This can be a sexual act in itself. Am I being too blunt? Am I being too Dutch now?
No, I don't think so.
No, I can't help but think this is great for the views on the podcast, but that's the wrong way. Anybody who keeps a straight face and says ejaculate, but it's it's no, but in all seriousness, yeah, getting somebody else's view on it. If I look back, things I wish I'd been told versus things I thought I knew, and it must be like that. I mean, is it like that for a woman? Did you, looking back now, do you think you knew things that you wish you'd been told?
I mean, there's so many things about sex, like for everybody, even for people fortunate enough not to have MS or some other chronic thing going on top of everything. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that we don't talk about, and there are so many ways to please ourselves and to please our partners, whoever we are, male, female, whatever. That yeah, you do kind of have to, find a lesbian friend, find just really anyone who is willing to talk to you about sex and like what they do. And the last time Dom and I talked about this, I was like look into something a little kinky on the internet. Like there's so many options, and I think as long as you're staying in communication with the other person, or hell, persons, if you're that cool, that you're doing it with, and everything is consensual and everybody understands, like really nothing's off the menu so long as everybody's agreed to what the diet is. I don't know, that metaphor kind of went south. But
Wendy, when you were diagnosed, and I'm asking you because it's fresher in your mind, I think, than any of us, did they say, and by the way, you may experience problems related to MS with your sex life? Was there anything like that? I mean, we're British, so I'm assuming there wasn't, but
no, nothing. No, nobody mentioned that at all. No, if anything, it was other people with MS that I've met along the way, if that makes sense, over the past 2 years, that mentioned it, because I suppose until something's an issue for you personally, you're not aware of it, are you really? Unless somebody else tells you, oh gosh, just be aware of this, that this is. And it tended to be, the other thing is, it tended to be mainly men rather than females, rather than women. And actually women do experience issues, but actually, they, as you said, they do, but it tends to be mainly men. And the focus, it's like you said, the focus tends to be on men as well.
But mainly men doctors?
No. I mean, like men with MS.
Oh, yeah.
So it tends to be, no doctors have ever mentioned sex at all. No doctors have ever mentioned that at all. Not one, even now. Even people that I know through, the work that I do, no one has, nobody's ever mentioned that. It tends to be men and people with MS that have mentioned it, to be fair, that I know now. I think it's interesting. It just tends to be a focus on men rather than women. And I do think that a lot of the kind of issues or challenges that women face tend to be mixed up along with menopause as well, because it does tend to be women of our age, with all due respect, that are more comfortable talking about these issues. I think it's changing, but I think it still is very much kind of, we're really comfortable talking about it. So therefore it kind of gets wrapped up in, well, you're over 40, I'm 46, and well, you're that kind of age, maybe it's that. And I'll admit it is quite confusing sometimes to understand which bit of it is, which bit of it is being perimenopausal and which bit of it is actually something else. It's really hard to unpick, isn't it? But no, there's definitely no focus, I don't think, at all from any kind of clinicians. It's never even mentioned from my MS nurse either.
Right, okay. Well, no, I was just, again,
yeah.
likewise. I mean, Marika, you put your hand up.
Yes. Maybe that, I'm not sure. I don't know whether this is, I think this is a Dutch thing. But when I was quite shortly after I was diagnosed, my MS nurse told me on like 2 occasions maybe that sexual dysfunction was a part of it, and that I could encounter those, and that if I did, that I should ring them up so he could get me in contact with a sexologist or a urologist or a therapist or whatever I needed.
Wow, that's so un-British.
Yeah, I think so.
I was just thinking that, Dom. I was just thinking that is exactly what. That is so real. That's the thing, isn't it? That is just so real. And, I'm kind of in awe of that, really, because that is just something that is just fantastic, really, because you just you wouldn't get that. You wouldn't get that in this country, to be honest. You wouldn't get that in England, you wouldn't get that kind of input. But why not? It's mad.
You think about it, if this was actually properly discussed, there'd be no point us having this conversation. We would add nothing to it, because it would have been covered and everybody would have felt comfortable thinking, like Marika said, going, oh, well, I'm having a problem, I don't know, with erections or vaginal dryness or whatever. And so I can just pick up the phone and, we can deal with this. And I could be referred to a therapist, or what do you call it? A sexologist.
A sexologist, yes. Is that not?
Sounds like a mixologist for a barman.
No, in Dutch it's called a seksuoloog. So I had to look it up to see if it was an actual word in English as well, but it is. But this is just basically a person who was educated and trained in all things mental and physical about sex, and well, they're therapists basically, so they help people on this topic.
I remember Dr. Ruth Vestheimer in the US growing up, this tiny little Jewish lady who was absolutely frank and always sort of shocked everyone. But, you know, she was a sex therapist, which I'm guessing, and her favorite
It's probably the
thing,
same.
I
think
never
so.
realized the significance of this. I remember her saying, and I'm not even going to try to do her voice, but she said, if you put a dime, which is 10 cents, you know, into a jar every time you have sex before you're married, and you take a dime out every time you have sex after you're married, you'll die with money. And at first it just baffled me. And then it's just like, okay. And I mean, I think it's just partly a fact of we age and it ceases to become the most important thing in your life.
I think that is until the option's taken away. I think that's probably true until there's issues. It's like, well, you could relate it to loads of things in life, couldn't you? But, until somebody says you can't do that anymore, or until you can't do it anymore, you think, actually, I really want to do it now. So I think that's true until you've got issues, and then you will.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's a worry for me. And the fact is that it's sex, and in Britain, everyone thinks you're just joking, but you think, God, I'd just like to have one more go before it was taken away. You know, if I knew it was going to be taken away. But I mean, that's the nature of MS, isn't it? That we kind of come full circle onto the fact of MS can suddenly just start screwing with you in a way that you did not expect yesterday, and you'd never had, and then all of a sudden something is just not there. It's not on the table anymore, and then you've got to deal with it mentally that it's not on the table.
I would love to circle back to something, to the question that you asked us that started us down this path, which is like, what would you say to a guy who is having trouble with erection or whatever the mechanical piece of sex might be? And oh golly, am I going to tell this? I will tell this because I am a brave lady. I recall being younger and being in a sexy situation with somebody who had had too much to drink and couldn't perform in the traditional P&V fashion. But my goodness, we had a lovely time regardless, because he was like, there's still stuff we can do that I can do for you. And it's like one of my fondest memories of a hookup. So like, there are options. And
your hands and your face are working, so there's other things you can do. Wendy's pulling face. No, but I'm just thinking, maybe the alcohol was the disinhibitor that he needed to think, what's that ghastly phrase? Think outside the box. Again, excuse the W.
It's terrible.
I didn't even mean it like that. See, and one of the reasons why, because I think, well, you've all sort of touched on it, it's very male focused a lot of the time. And that's why I purposely thought I'm going to sort of get 3 against 1, people who are just going to gang up and say, shut up, Dominic, or you're wrong or whatever, because I think it's unfair, because I have never met a guy, if we've ever talked about things, that hasn't shared a fairly simplistic view on things. As you said, the P and V, and it's, whereas women are always seen like a slight mystery of the, there's so much more there, and how come they don't just want P and V? And it's just like, well, actually, maybe there's a reason. I mean, let me turn around. What would you say to a young woman that was suddenly experiencing problems due to her MS, where she wanted to have sex but was finding it challenging? you know, and she's on the other side. She's got a guy who's sort of the P and V view, and you know, she's not or no longer able to. I don't know what the phrase is. You know, entertain in the same way.
I think I think I would first advise her to try to not be uncomfortable, to feel free to talk about her problems, and also to acknowledge that bodies work sometimes in stupid ways or disgusting ways, and you know, I think that men are more easily okay with things being, you know, not very clean.
I mean, they're also
Yourself.
more easily disgusting, so there's that as well.
Right. So I think that would be a first step, and then then again communicate. Just say what you want and why you are not, why your needs are not being fulfilled, and what your needs are, like what you want to try and what turns you on, and, you know, all that awkward stuff.
Do you guys agree with the liberated Dutch person?
I think it depends on the situation, doesn't it? I think if you give an advice to somebody who's not in a long-term relationship and is actively looking for a new partner, and you know, is in a situation where they're going to meet somebody new, I think the advice that you give them will be very different. I think you just, you know, it's about that. You know, at the end of the day, you know, some people are comfortable in telling people straight away that they've got MS. Some people aren't, and they don't want to tell anybody. But I think if it comes down to that particular issue, you're going to have to, you know, think about seriously being open about it, aren't you? Because at the end of the day, you know, it depends what, do you want anything out of the scenario or not, I suppose, is what I'm going to, you know, let's be honest. Is it just something that you're not really that bothered about? You know, you've gone past that point of no return. And I kind of, you know, after a night out, and are you really bothered about getting anything out of it? I'm just being honest here. You know, are you bothered? Or
Don't
actually,
wake me up when you leave.
That's it. Or are you bothered because you see this person as someone you want to see again? And therefore, actually, it's about being open, isn't it? And being honest. I think it's like you guys said, you know, you've got to be honest about it, but you've got to be comfortable with having that conversation. I think what's difficult and what's an interesting topic is how you have that conversation. Because I'm really open person, you know, yeah, spot the Brit here. You can definitely spot the Brit in this conversation. But I would be really comfortable with that conversation. But I think I would struggle with elements of it, because I would struggle with, and I think it comes back to the point that I made right at the beginning, which is that being comfortable with who you are and how you're perceived. And I think that's the bit that would worry me, is I would worry and think to myself, how are they really going to perceive me now? Do you know what I mean? And you know, is this going to change what they think about me? But then the other part of me thinks to myself, well, if they do think that, then I don't want to sleep with them anyway. Does that make sense? So I think it's how you have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's the whole, but you've got to have that self-confidence in yourself, haven't you? I mean, if you're racked with doubt and you're thinking that this defines you and the other person's going to be put off when they find out about it, then back to what you say, Wendy, my view has always been, well, if that's your view, sod off. I'm not interested, you know, because,
I agree with what you said, Wendy. And I was, in my story, I was thinking of a woman who was in a permanent relationship. I mean,
okay.
I agree that it's very different if you, you know, placing a hookup or something.
Yeah, I mean,
hookup, that's a bit away.
Hookup, yeah. More Tinder than marriage.
Right.
That's it, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's been so long. I can't even imagine. Rebecca.
What would your advice be, Rebecca? What would you tell a young woman who is sort of agonizing over the fact that MS is interrupting her ordinary sex life, should we say, or her, you know, the way she would ordinarily operate?
The first thing I would say is it might be really useful to talk to a therapist. because like so many of the issues that have come up along the way, like, am I still attractive? Will I still be attractive to other people? Will whoever this, nameless, faceless human in front of me, that sounds like I'm endorsing anonymous sex, and you do you, but but this man, woman, whoever is in front of me, will they think of me differently if I clearly state like what I need from this? So yeah, these are good things to unpack with a good girlfriend, with a therapist. That's also a good place to like role play conversations. So that when you do go in, if you are nervous about talking to your partner about these things, like at least you have some experience under your belt. And the other thing is, I would say, and I think women are probably better at this than men are, because, orgasms are not guaranteed to ladies. And I know they're technically not guaranteed to men, but, most of the time, if you're doing the thing, there will be an orgasm. I know it's more nuanced than that. And I think that's a fairly safe blanket statement to make. But like adjusting, or at least being open to adjusting your relationship to pleasure, physical pleasure, so that maybe, again, the fireworks may not happen and the sigh may not happen, but at the end of it all, you can think, that was fun. That felt good. I am glad I did that. That's worth cultivating as well. I think it certainly made a huge difference for me, because I used to like be done, didn't get the thing that I wanted from it, and I'd be like, well, why did I even waste my time? Now I have to put my clothes back on, all of it. Whereas as I've said before, sex is really fun, no matter how it ends. Yeah, often, yeah. Ideally.
I know. Sex to me is as much up here as it is in all the, if when certainly as a bloke, when you're younger, you're, shall we say, less picky, because it's the act that matters. And certainly as I've got older, it's like, yeah, the act's one thing, but who you're doing it with and how they make you feel in general, not just in the time, because you can essentially go and pay for that. If that's what you need, you could purchase that. But when you want it more than just, a financial transaction, it's like, I can get a massage, and that's just an ordinary one, by the way, before anyone starts sniggering. It's just, but to me, that's just a financial transaction, and it feels nicer, but it wears off. You sort of half an hour later, you're thinking, oh, I've just spent 50 quid and I now feel like I was, before I went in.
Is it 50?
But for that moment, it was really nice.
Sorry.
I love the way I'm making you laugh unintentionally. But if we're going to wrap this up, because we could all just bang on about this for ages. I mean, I'm just thinking.
Bang on. There's another one.
Oh, see, you're terrible. You guys are worse than me. I didn't really think. I can see Wendy just laughing and her mind's going like this. But it's you guys are all worse than me. It's I'm the one I thought I'd be sitting there trying to, as we say, trying not to make knob gags. But it's I haven't had to worry about that. You guys have done it for me. So it's but to wrap this up, because what do you think is the best way? Do you have a piece of advice, Wendy? You're looking puzzled. What one piece of advice would you impart to somebody?
I just listening to it all, and just, and everybody's at different stages, aren't they, in terms of their journey, aren't they, along the way with MS, aren't they? We're all in different places. There's something for me about, I just want the same as everybody else, really. It's no different. It's just that if I, I just want to, be enjoying myself the same as anybody else who hasn't got MS, really, to be honest. And I think it's just, it might take a little bit more communication at some point. It might take a little bit more openness, and I might have to be a little bit more comfortable myself with having that conversation. And that might mean as you've all said, about, you know, talking therapies or having that conversation with somebody that can help me get my head around that and help me to be brave about that conversation. But essentially, I just want the same as everybody else. And I'm just going to put a little bit more effort into thought process around how I go about communicating what I need. Because it is, isn't it? It's about what you need to kind of get that kind of joint level of satisfaction out of it, really. And it might be different from what I needed 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, this circles right back to the introduction. You know, to me, I always wonder how much this has actually got to do with MS in some ways. Yeah, MS stops us doing certain things. There's certain physical things which can be addressed in that sort of doctor territory. But as Marieka was saying, you know, shockingly, your MS nurse actually approached this topic. You know, therapy. I mean, I know. So in the UK, I would imagine you would have to make the effort to say to your nurse, your MS nurse, I want to go speak to somebody. And I'm sure they could refer you, but all the services in the UK are sort of very stretched. So it won't happen tomorrow. The thing is, you better not be wanting to have any serious sex for 6 months before you got your referral, but you'll probably get it. In the States, Rebecca, it's all private, isn't it? Essentially. So how would you go about, could you just pick up the phone and go see a therapist? You know, or would you go through your doctor or your nurse or anything like that?
It depends on the kind of insurance you have.
Right. Okay.
So you could potentially like do the search yourself, or you could go through somebody.
Right. But ultimately, you'd be looking for your insurance to bear some of the cost.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the Netherlands, Marieka, is that, yeah, I mean, your nurse actually said it to you. You guys also have a state-funded healthcare system, don't you? Or is it, do you pay?
No, basically, if you have a referral, you don't have to pay for it. No.
Right. Okay. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think that's the message. Sometimes it's too easy as Brits just to think it works like it does here, when it can work significantly different. And we all look in England at the US system, and I find it vaguely frightening and think I would not want to get ill there unless I was insured up to the eyeballs.
Yeah, it's great fun. And we can talk about my out-of-pocket costs on another call someday.
Yeah. I don't want you to cry, though. That makes me uncomfortable.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. Well, unless it's after sex, but you know, it's
What?
job well done.
No.
Okay. Oh God.
See, I told you I could throw in the odd curveball.
That's a cheap one,
Oh,
Dom.
God.
That was.
Oh, I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
It's yeah. Whereas you guys are all dead to stand classy
Ours were
sniggering.
better. Yeah.
Fine, okay, yeah. See, this is the difference. So, guys, look, I appreciate you all giving up your time.
I want to give my last piece of advice,
Yeah,
and I
crack
want to
on.
hear Marieka's too. So mine, I think, in addition to like the talking communication is so important, but I really think that idea of broadening how you look at sex and how you look at pleasure and like what falls into those categories can make a huge difference.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Marieka, I'm just slightly in awe that it was actually brought up to you. You know, so I'm sorry. So what would your advice be?
Oh, okay. So Wendy's and Rebecca's advice already said it all, but I'll try to throw in through a different angle. I'd say help yourself, in the sense that you have to look at yourself, like what you need, what you want, and go get it. If it's through a therapist, if it's through talking to your partner, or, you know, sex toys and gadgets and lube and all that stuff, just you are in charge of your own life, your own health, and in certain ways also of your own sex life.
Well, it's intertwined, I think, and that's probably the biggest difference is age. You know, we can say this, but I'm not sure. I wish somebody had said it to me when I was younger and sort of legitimized it by saying that this is an okay thing to do. Because I think a lot of people worry because, you know, it's in isolation, it's sex, you don't talk about it. But to have other people talk about it legitimizes it and makes you think, oh, actually, I'm not the only one here. But,
And
I
I'll
think it'd be,
just throw, oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, I think it'd be really interesting to have more of these conversations and involve some, early 20s, newly diagnosed, you know what I mean? And kind of
Mhm.
I
understand
asked a couple, they were not interested. They just
this.
balked. And it wasn't that I was being a creepy old man, I hope, but it was just that it was not something they were sort of comfortable talking about. Because I
No,
said
and
there'll be a
that's the
couple of
thing.
other women there. Nuh-uh.
Yeah, there won't be.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, so many things, I think, like how we live and behave and communicate and all of that, like the changes we make as people with MS, I think could help so many people without MS. Although the specific challenges we're going through are largely MS related, they also could be due to a bajillion other things like perimenopause or menopause or any other things. So I hope, like, in addition to having conversations with your friends with MS, like, just have conversations in general, because this is stuff that people don't talk about that I think we're all better when we do. Just maybe not with our parents, because
You just made me think of something that's a snigger item. Wendy's best mate's called Bushy.
Oh no. Do you know, I was just thinking about her actually, Dom, because I was just thinking about Claire. There's so much, you're
Oh,
absolutely
you
right.
said her first name. I was never going to do that.
Sorry, I did say her first name, didn't I? I better not say that, yeah.
Right.
It's interesting actually, because she's a real kind of, supporter of anything that I'm going through on kind of this journey. And it's interesting that you just said about people learning from kind of, what we sort of know and have picked up. And that's one person that whatever's going on in terms of MS, whether it's exercise or anything new, she's got to try it. Do you know what I mean? She's like, right, I'll try that. We're on the cacao powder for extra energy, for fatigue. I'll have a spoonful of that in my coffee. And I think you made a really good point there, Rebecca, because I think it's true. This is just general advice, isn't it? It's about, unfortunately, as Marika said, you've got to advocate for yourself, haven't you? You've got to advocate for yourself. And that's the general theme, isn't it, of MS, is just really advocating for what you need, what you want, and what you want to hear, and advice and stuff. And I think that goes for anything in life, doesn't it? It's just that we have to be a bit braver about it, I think, and a bit more pushy.
I think you're very lucky with Bushy as a mate, who's just all in. Going, I definitely need. I don't want to know how far that her commitment goes, but I can imagine it's. Anyway, I'm slightly saying that because she'll probably hear the podcast with you in it and then just wince.
She will scream. She will hide behind a cushion.
She'll scream, will she? Another duplicate. Okay. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming along. I really appreciate it. It's you've given up your time. It's awesome. I just think that I would echo everything you say, because generally that's what I do, because it just sounds like common sense from the three of you guys. And you've got to essentially ask for help, and there's third party, non-judgmental therapist style help, however you dress it up, and I think that's a lot easier when you can talk to somebody who's entirely removed from the situation. You're not going to talk to your mum or your dad or your brother or your sister about it. It's just, it's a stranger who's bound by medical confidentiality and moving on. So, and that's probably where you're going to get the biggest effect, isn't it? So I just want to wish you guys, I was going to say a happy new year, but that's already passed. So it feels
it's still
corny.
newish.
Yeah. Well, look, I really appreciate everything that you guys have done. Thanks. And I'll see you again soon.
Thank you.